Welcome back to Movieworld Recaps. Today I am going to share a thriller, drama movie, Parasite. Ki-woo Kim is a young man who lives in poverty with his father Ki-taek Kim, mother Chung-suk Kim, and sister Ki-young in the slums of an unnamed South Korean city. The family lives in a garden unit where it's hard to find a Wi-Fi signal to sneak into so they can watch TV on the internet. They also get fumigated and have to watch men urinate in the alley outside their home. They get by doing simple jobs like folding pizza boxes, and even then, the people who work at the pizza place criticize them for making a mess of the boxes. Min-hyuk, a rich friend of Ki-woo's, comes to visit the family and gives them a rock that is said to bring its owner wealth and happiness. He then tells Ki-woo that he has been tutoring the daughter of a very rich family since she was a teenager. He is going to study abroad, but he is in love with the daughter and knows that any of the other college boys would steal her away. He wants Ki-woo to be her tutor because he knows Ki-woo will keep an eye on her so that Min-hyuk can ask her out when she finishes high school. Ki-woo knows he isn't qualified because he isn't in college, but Min-hyuk promises to vouch for him, so he agrees and has Ki-young make fake credentials for him to take to his interview. Ki-woo goes to an interview with the wealthy Park family, where he meets Mr. Park, his disorganized wife Mrs. Park, and their two kids, Da-hye, who is a teenager, and Da-sung, who is a young boy. Ki-woo figures out that he needs to flirt with Da-hye to get the job, so he does. Mrs. Park pays him a lot of money and tells him that they need an art teacher for Da-sung. After seeing a ghost in his house and having a seizure, Da-sung has been having trouble with his art and needs help. Ki-woo introduces them to Ki-young, who forges her own documents and goes by the name Jessica. Ki-young also starts making a lot of money right away. When the Park's limo driver takes Ki-young home, she leaves her underwear in the car to get him fired. She then suggests that her uncle, who is really Ki-taek, be the new driver. The last job is that of Moon-kwang, the housekeeper. She has worked at the house since before the Park family moved in. She worked for the eccentric architect who owned the house before the Parks. The Kims take advantage of her allergy to peaches and make her have allergic reactions. They then convince Mrs. Park that she is seriously ill and can't be around their son. She is heartbroken and leaves, and Mrs. Kim gets the job, making the Park family think they should hire the whole Kim family. When the Park family leaves to go camping for the birthday song's weekend, the Kim family takes the chance to stay in the huge Park house for the weekend. When the doorbell rings, it's Moon-kwang. They've been drinking, eating, and making a mess all night. She says that she was fired so quickly that she couldn't get something before she left, and she just wants it back. Mrs. Kim reluctantly lets her in, and Moon-kwang runs into the basement and starts screaming, which opens a secret passage behind some shelves. She goes to see her husband, Gun-sae, who has been hiding out in the bunker since the last owner moved out to avoid loan sharks. She gives him food while Mrs. Kim watches in horror. She tells Moon-kwang she needs to leave, and as Moon-kwang begs her to let them stay, the rest of the Kim family, who had been listening in, falls off the stairs and into view. They call each other dad, etc., which Moon-kwang films on her phone, realizing the family has tricked her. She says she will send it to the Park family and uses that threat to get the Kim family to do what she and her husband want. The Kim family beats them and gets them into the secret bunker, but then the Park family calls to say that it's raining and they have to cancel their camping trip and will be home in 8 minutes. The Kims rush around trying to clean up as much mess as they can while keeping the other two kids in the basement. They do a good enough job that the rest of the family can hide while Mrs. Kim feeds the Parks. When Moon-kwang escapes and runs upstairs, Mrs. Kim pushes her back down the stairs, where she hits her head and is badly hurt. The bunker is locked, so Moon-kwang and Gun-sae can't get out. Mr. and Mrs. Park end up sleeping in the living room so they can keep an eye on Da-sung, who is camping in the backyard. This means that Mr. and Mrs. Kim have to stay under the table all night, freezing, while Mr. and Mrs. Park complain about Mr. Kim's smell and then have sex. In the end, they are able to sneak out in the middle of the night. When they get home, the rain and sewage have flooded their whole apartment. Ki-woo takes the rock, and the rest of the family spends the night in a shelter. The next day, Mrs. Park throws Dasong an unplanned party. As helpers, the Kim family is invited, but they have to act like they don't know that two people are locked in a bunker under the house. Gun-se waits for Ki-woo down in the bunker, where Moon-kwang has already died, and hits him over the head with the rock. Afterward, he goes to the party and stabs Ki-young in the chest. Gun-se was the ghost that Dasong had seen in the house before the party exploded into chaos and gave Dasong a seizure. Mr. Park yells at his driver, Mr. Kim, who is trying to stop Ki bleeding, yearns to give him the car keys so he can drive his son to the hospital. Mr. Kim catches the keys and throws them to Mr. Park. They land on Gun-se, who is fighting with Mrs. Kim. She kills him by sticking a meat skewer into him. Mr. Park gets the keys but says he doesn't like the way Gun-se smells. This makes Mr. Kim lose it, and he stabs Mr. Park to death. Mrs. Park passes out as Mr. Kim runs away. Ki-woo wakes up in the hospital after being in a coma for several weeks. He finds out that Ki-young has died, and he and Mrs. Kim are given probation. Even though the police have been looking for Mr. Kim everywhere, they haven't seen him since Mr. Park was killed. Ki-woo puts the rock in a river and watches the former Park house, where he sees the lights flickering. Ki-woo figures out that the flickering is Morse code and learns that Mr. Kim is controlling the lights from inside the bunker, where he now lives, sneaking upstairs to steal food from the new owners. Ki-woo writes back to his father, telling him that he will get rich enough one day to buy the house and bring his family back together.